Alien girl ran out of her expensive medicine. Only the human shared his dose. The toxic winds howled across the desolate landscape of Nexus 7, carrying clouds of poisonous gas that could strip the flesh from most living creatures in minutes. Jared Thorne stood at the entrance of his makeshift shelter, a converted piece of wreckage from what had once been an Empyrean cruiser. His ice-blue eyes scanned the horizon. Through the thick, swirling mist that perpetually shrouded this forsaken world, 3 years, since he'd refused that order and become a fugitive from the Empyrean Empire, 3 years of surviving on this hellhole, where even the most hardened criminals feared to tread. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd become an outlaw for refusing to kill innocents. And now he was probably the only person alive on this godforsaken rock. His long, dark chestnut hair whipped around his face as he adjusted the rebreather mask that kept the toxic atmosphere at bay. The black sleeveless shirt clung to his muscular frame, and his tactical vest carried the few precious supplies that meant the difference between life and death out here. The storm was coming. He could feel it in his bones, see it in the way the poisonous clouds were gathering on the horizon. Time to head back inside and wait it out, but something caught his eye. Movement where there should be none. Through his binoculars, he spotted a figure stumbling between the twisted metal graves of fallen ships. Even from this distance, her distinctly feminine form was unmistakable, and definitely not human. Silver hair gleamed despite the dim light, and her black outfit, though tattered, wore the distinctive metallic embroidery of Empyrean nobility. Well, Jared muttered, lowering the binoculars, this day just got interesting. He watched as she stumbled again, clutching something in her hand. His conscience wed with his survival instinct. The smart play was to stay hidden. Any contact with civilization could leave the Empyrean forces right to him. But if she died out there, her ship's emergency beacon would activate, bringing exactly the attention he was trying to avoid. It. He growled, grabbing his gear. The universe has a sick sense of humor anyway. As he approached, he could see her more clearly, pale skin almost luminescent in the toxic haze, and those distinctive golden eyes with yellow scarad, definitely Etherian. She was fumbling with what looked like a medical capsule, desperately trying to squeeze out the last drops. You're a long way from the golden spires of Ethor, he called out, keeping his distance, but close enough to be heard over the howling wind. She spun around, nearly losing her balance. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. A human here of all places. Stay back, she warned. But her voice wavered with exhaustion. Jared raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. Relax, princess. If I wanted to hurt you, I'd just wait for your meds to run out. He nodded toward the empty capsule in her hand. That's Nexon. Isn't it the only thing keeping your kind alive in the soup we call air? Her shoulders slumped slightly, though she maintained her defensive posture. How do you know about Nexalin? Let's just say I've had plenty of time to learn about survival on this rock. He reached slowly into his vest pocket and pulled out a vial of silvery liquid. And I'm guessing you could use this right about now. Her golden eyes fixed on the vial, desperation wearing with suspicion. That's your dose. You need that to survive. Jared shrugged. I've got enough to last. While you, on the other hand, look like you're running on empty. Why would you help me? She asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. You don't even know me. Because you need it more than I do, he said, simply holding out the vial. And contrary to what your empire might think, not all humans are selfish bastards. The alien woman hesitated for a moment longer before reaching out to take the vial with trembling fingers. As she did, a violent gust of wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Jared instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand catching her arm. Storm's coming, he said, looking at the darkening sky. The big one. We need to move. Now she glanced at the roiling clouds approaching, then back at him. Where? I've got a shelter nearby, unless you'd prefer to take your chances with the acid rain. A particularly loud crack of thunder emphasized his point. The woman quickly administered the Nexalin, her breathing steadying almost immediately. Lead the way, she said, her voice stronger now. They made it to his shelter just as the first drops began to fall, droplets that could eat through Elf's standard protective gear. In minutes, Jared sealed the heavy door behind them, engaging the magnetic locks. Inside, the space was cramped but functional. Salvaged equipment lined the walls, and a small power generator hummed In the corner, emergency lights cast everything in a soft blue GL. "I'm Jared," he said, removing his rebreather mask. "And you are?" She hesitated before answering Tyla. She too removed her mask, revealing delicate features that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Tyla Nix." "Well, Tyla Nix, welcome to my humble abode." He gestured to the limited space. "It's not much, but it keeps the acid rain out." "Why are you here?" she asked, studying him with those unsettling golden eyes. "This PLID. It's where people come to disappear." Jared let out a dry laugh. "Maybe that's exactly why I'm here." He moved to check the seals on the windows as another wave of thunder rolled overhead. "The real question is what brings an Ethereum noble to this toxic wasteland. What makes you think I'm noble?" "The embroidery on your clothes, that's Empyrean ceremonial threading, not exactly standard issue." He turned back to face her. "Plus, you carry yourself like someone used to giving orders, not taking them." A small smile played at her lips. "You're more observant than most humans I've met had to be to survive out here." He pulled out 2 containers of purified water, offering her one. "So you going to tell me what brought you to my neck of the woods?" Before she could answer, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a wounded beast. The shelter creaked ominously around them. "Sounds like we're going to be here a while," Jared said, settling onto a makeshift. "Jay, might as well get comfortable." Tyler remained standing, her posture tense. "You're remarkably calm about sharing your shelter with a stranger lady on this planet. The weather is more likely to kill us than either of us is to kill each other." He took a sip of water. "Besides, you're not the only one running from something." Her eyes narrowed. "What makes you think I'm running?" "Because nobody comes to Nexus 7 by choice." The storm raged outside, making the shelter's metal walls creak and groan under the salt of toxic winds. Inside, the small space felt even more confined as Jared and Tyler sat in the blue-tinted glow of the emergency lights. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. "So," Jared broke the silence, "want to tell me what an Etherean noble is really doing on this hellhole?" Tyler's golden eyes flickered to him, then away. She'd removed her outer jacket, revealing a form-fitting black undersuit that left little to the imagination. "Perhaps I simply enjoyed the scenery." "Right," he chuckled, running a hand through his dark hair. "The acid rain and toxic clouds are particularly lovely this time of year." A small smile played at her lips. "Your human sarcasm is refreshing." She shifted, drawing her knees up to her chest. "Most species find it offensive. Most species need to lighten up." He leaned back, studying her. "But your deflecting thunder crashed outside, making the shelter shudder." Tyla tensed her hand, instinctively reaching for the vial of Nexilin he'd given her. Jared noticed the gesture. "That'll last you about 3 days," he said softly. After that I'll be dead." She met his gaze directly. "Unless I can get off this planet, which brings us back to why you're here in the first place." Tyla was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the metallic embroidery on her discarded jacket. "There are people looking for me, Empyrean assassins." Jared straightened. "What did you do to piss off the Empire that badly?" "I discovered something I wasn't supposed to know." She laughed bitterly. "Isn't that always how these stories go usually?" He stood pacing the small space. "And now you're hiding on the one planet where they'd never think to look." It seemed like a good plan at the time. Her eyes followed his movement. "Until I ran out of next accent." Jared stopped pacing, turning to face her. You know, most people would have just killed me and taken my supply." "I'm not most people." She rose, gracefully closing the distance between them. "And neither are you, Jared Thorne." He stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "My full name, because I've seen your file." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The human officer who refused to bomb civilian settlements, the one who disappeared without a face." Their faces were inches apart now. Jared could see the subtle patterns in her golden irises, like swirling nebulae that was classified information. Yes, it was her breath ghosted across his face, carrying a faint sweet scent like summer berries, just like the information that got me sentenced to death. The air between them felt electric. Jared was acutely aware of her proximity, of the way her silver hair seemed to catch and reflect the emergency lighting. "You're playing a dangerous game, Tyler. Life is a dangerous game." Her hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt. "But you already know that, don't you?" The shelter creaked around them, but neither moved. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough right now. Her lips curved into a smile that made his pulse quicken. "I want to know what it feels like to kiss a human who values principles over orders." Jared knew he should step back, maintain distance, keep his guard up, but 3 years of solitude had left him starved for connection, and something about this woman called to him on a primal level. "This is a bad idea." "Probably," she agreed, then pulled him down to her. Their lips met, and Jared forgot about caution, forgot about survival, forgot about everything except the feel of her against him. Her skin was cooler than a human's, but her mouth was warm and eager. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Tyler's eyes were glowing brighter than before. "That was unexpected." "The kiss, or the fact that you liked it?" Jared asked, his thumb tracing circles on her hip. "Both." She pressed closer, her body fitting perfectly against his. "I've never with a human." "We don't have to." She silenced him with another kiss more demanding than the first. "I want to." The storm outside intensified, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in their own world of discovery and desire, learning the differences and similarities between their species through touch and taste. Their coupling was passionate yet tender, a celebration of life in a place designed for death. Afterward, they lay together on Jared's narrow bunk, her head resting on his chest as he traced patterns on her pale skin. The storm had begun to die down, but neither was in a hurry to move. "You know, this doesn't solve anything," Jared said. "Finally, the assassins are still coming." "I know." Tyler propped herself up on an elbow, looking down at him. "But for the first time since I fled, I don't feel alone." He reached up to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. "What did you find out? What was worth killing you over?" Her expression darkened. "The Empire. They're developing something, a weapon that could." A sudden explosion rocked the shelter, cutting her off. They both sat up, instantly alert. Through the small window, they could see multiple ships descending through the toxic clouds. "They found me," Tyler whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Jared was already moving, grabbing weapons and supplies. "Get dressed. We need to move where there's nowhere to run on this planet." He tossed her a spare rebreather mask. "Then we'll have to fight." Their eyes met in the dim light, understanding passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The first blast tore through the shelter's eastern wall, sending shrapnel flying. Jared instinctively pulled Tyler behind a metal storage container, his body shielding hers from the debris. The acrid smell of melted metal filled the air as toxic fumes began seeping through the breach. "6 hostiles," Tyler whispered, her golden eyes piercing through the swirling dust. "Is standard Empyrean assassination squad formation." Jared reached for his pulse rifle, checking the charge. "How did they find you so quickly?" "They must have tracked my ship's residual energy signature." She drew a sleek pistol from her boot, a weapon she'd kept concealed. "Until now, I thought the storm would mask it. Well, they're about to learn why nobody hunts on this rock." Jared flashed her a dangerous smile, ready to show these bastards what happens when they interrupt a perfect moment. Tyler's answering grin was predatory. "I do owe you for sharing your medicine. Shall we share some violence instead?" Another explosion rocked the shelter. This time from the opposite wall, the assassins were trying to box them in. Jared could see their shadows through the toxic mist, tall, armored figures, moving with mechanical precision. "They're using standard Empyrean tactical protocols." Tyler observed, her voice carrying a hint of contempt. "Predictable. Good thing I never cared much for protocols." Jared reached into his vest and pulled out a small device. "Remember how I survived here for 3 years? By being clever, by being unpredictable." He pressed a button, and suddenly all the emergency lights went dark. In the same instant, hidden panels in the floors slid open, releasing clouds of local toxic gas into the shelter. The assassins' surprise shouts were music to his ears. Their environmental suits were designed to filter standard atmospheric toxins, not the concentrated cocktail of poisons Jared had collected and weaponized over the years. "The vents under the floor." Tyler breathed, understanding dawning in her luminous eyes. "You've turned your entire shelter into a trap, lady." "I've turned this whole planet into a trap." They moved in perfect sync, years of combat experience guiding their actions. Jared had learned to fight in the darkness of this world. While Tyler's Etherean eyes could pierce any gloom together, they were lethal. The first assassin died without ever seeing them. Tyler's energy blades sliding between armor plates as Jared's rifle took down his partner. The N4 responded with brutal efficiency, their weapons filling the air with plasma bolts. Your 3 o'clock. Tyler called out, dropping and rolling as Jared pivoted, catching an assassin trying to flank them. The shot caught the attacker in the faceplate, shattering it. The toxic atmosphere did the rest. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, each anticipating the other's moves. When Jared ducked, Tyler fired over his head. When she spun away from an attacker, he was there to catch them off guard. Behind you, Jared tackled her as a blade whistled through the space where her head had been. They rolled together, coming up, firing. The assassin fell, chest smoking from their combined shots. The last two attackers retreated toward the debris, trying to regroup. Bad move. Jared triggered his second surprise electromagnetic charges that turned their own armor against them, locking their joints and leaving them helpless against the poisonous atmosphere. As the dust settled, Tyla stood in the center of the carnage, her silver hair glowing in the dim light that filtered through the breaches. She never looked more beautiful to Jared than in that moment, fierce, alive, and utterly magnificent. That was she paused, searching for words. Impressive, terrifying, incredibly attractive. Jared suggested, moving closer. All of the above. She reached for him, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of adrenaline and victory. I've never fought alongside any like that before. It was like we were made for each other. He traced the curve of her jaw with his thumb. Yeah, I felt it too. Their eyes met. And suddenly the dead assassins, the toxic atmosphere, all of it faded away. There was only this moment, this connection that defied explanation. This time when they came together, it was with the fierce passion of warriors who had faced death and emerged stronger. Their touches were urgent, desperate, a celebration of survival and a defiance of the universe that wanted them dead. Later, as they lay amid the wreckage of what had once been his home, Tyler traced the scars on his chest. We can't stay here. No, Jared agreed. But we're not running either. He sat up, pulling her with him. Those were just the first wave. More will come, and we'll be ready. She stood magnificent in her determination. But first we need supplies. Weapons and more. Excellent, Jared finished. I know where we can get both. There's an abandoned Empyrean research station about 20 clicks north. I've been raying it for years. You're full of surprises, aren't you, sweetheart? You haven't seen anything yet. He began gathering what supplies they could salvage. But before we go, there's something you need to tell me. What's this weapon the Empire's developing? What makes it worth killing? Over Tyler's expression darkened. It's not just a weapon, Jared. It's a perversion of everything I discovered about human DNA. They're trying to create something that could rewrite the genetic code of entire species. Why? Because humans terrify them. She met his gaze steadily. Your adaptability, your resilience, your capacity for both destruction and compassion. It's unlike anything in the known galaxy. The Empire wants to harness that power. Control it. Jared absorbed this information, feeling a cold anger build in his chest. Well then, he said finally, I guess we'll just have to show them exactly why humans are so terrifying. The abandoned Empyrean research station loomed before them, a twisted mass of metal and broken dreams, half buried in toxic sand. Jared led the way, his boots leaving clear tracks in the poisonous dust. 3 years of raiding this place had taught him every entrance, every blind spot, every deadly trap left behind by its former occupants. This way, he whispered, guiding Tyler through a maintenance shaft he discovered during his first year of exile. Watch your steps. Some of the floor panels are unstable. Her golden eyes glowed in the darkness as she followed, moving with the fluid grace that still captivated him. You said you've been raiding this place for supplies. Ever wonder why an ancient research station would stock human-compatible medicines? The question had haunted him for years. I assumed they were studying the local toxins, veiling countermeasures. A reasonable assumption. Tyler's voice carried a hint of bitterness, but wrong. They emerged into what had once been a primary research lab. Dust-covered equipment lined the walls and broken display screens hung at odd angles. Jared moved to a hidden panel, revealing his personal cache of supplies. Talk to me, Tyler. What really happened here? She ran her fingers along a nearby console, bringing it flickering to life. This wasn't just any research station. This was where it all began. Project Evolution. Data streams filled the ancient screen, most corrupted, but some still readable. Jared felt his blood run cold as he processed what he was seeing. These are human genetic sequences. The Empire didn't choose this planet for its hostile environment. Tyler explained, her fingers dancing across the console. They chose it because something in the local ecosystem affects genetic stability, makes DNA more malleable. A message alert suddenly flashed across the screen. Recent urgent. Tyler's hands trembled as she opened it. By the stars, she whispered, Jared, they're ready. The weapon, they're planning to test it on the human colony of New Eden in 3 days. Jared felt rage building in his chest. How many people? 8 million colonists. She met his gaze. All of them will be transformed into something else. Something the Empire can control like hell. They will. He grabbed additional supplies from his cache, including several vials of Nexalin. We need to stop them. Jared. Tyler caught his arm. There's more. Look at this. She pulled up another file, this one showing detailed maps of the planet's surface, with one area marked in red, your crash site. It wasn't in an accident that brought you here. What are you saying? The Empire knew about your reputation for moral strength, your refusal to harm innocents. They needed someone like you, someone who could survive here, someone whose genetic code showed particular resilience to environmental changes. The implications hit him like a physical blow. I was their test subject all this time. Your presence here proved their theories about human adaptability. Tyler moved closer, her cool hand cupping his face. But they never expected you to be so human, and to show kindness to a stranger, to share your medicine with someone who needed it more. Their eyes met, and suddenly the weight of everything, the conspiracy, the danger, the ticking clock, seemed to fade away. Jared pulled her close, his lips finding hers, in a kiss that spoke of shared purpose and growing devotion. When they finally parted, Tyler's eyes were glowing, brighter than ever. I've never known anyone like you, Jared Thorne. You humans, you're capable of such darkness, yet you choose light, such violence, yet you choose mercy. Maybe that's what really scares them, he murmured, trailing kisses down her neck. Not our strength or our adaptability, but our choice to be better than our nature. Their passion ignited again, more intense than before. In the shadows of the abandoned lab, surrounded by evidence of humanity's potential enslavement, they found solace in each other. Their coupling was both an act of defiance against the Empire and a celebration of the connection they'd found in this toxic wasteland. Afterward, as they lay together on Jared's emergency blanket, Tyler traced the scars on his chest. We have to stop them. We will. He sat up, pulling her with him. But first we need a plan, and a ship. I might be able to help with both. She moved to the console again, pulling up new files. The weapon will be deployed from the Imperial flagship Destiny's Hand. I have access codes, old ones, but they might still work. And the ship, a smile played across her lips. This station has a hidden hangar. Emergency evacuation protocols required them to maintain at least one functional vessel at all times. You're telling me there's been a working ship here all along? Jared laughed. And here I've been walking everywhere like a sucker. The Empire's arrogance works in our favor. They never bothered to remove it because they believed no one could survive here long enough to find it. Jared gathered their supplies, including Nexalin, for both of them. 3 days to save 8 million people. No pressure. Are you afraid? He turned to her, taking in her fierce beauty, her determination, her strength. Terrified, but not of failing, of what then? Of succeeding, of having to rejoin a galaxy that's trying to either kill us or control us. He pulled her close, of losing this, whatever this is between us. She kissed him softly. Then don't lose it. Keep choosing to be better. Keep surprising me. Keep being human, as opposed to what? As opposed to what the Empire wants, to turn humanity into predictable, controllable, safe. She stepped back, checking her weapons, ready to show them just how dangerous human unpredictability can be. Jared grinned, shouldering his rifle. Lady, I've been ready for 3 years. The hidden hangar was a cathedral of shadows, its vast space filled with the ghostly silhouettes of abandoned equipment. Jared and Tyler made their way through the darkness, guided by the soft glow of emergency lights in her luminescent eyes. There, Tyler pointed to a sleek vessel nestled in the far corner, an Empyrean Shadow-class infiltrator. Fast, stealthy, and perfect for our needs, Jared whistled appreciatively. She's beautiful. He ran his hand along the ship's smooth hull, almost too beautiful. Why would they leave something this valuable behind? Because they never expected anyone to. Tyler froze, her enhanced senses picking up something Jared couldn't detect. We're not alone. The warning came just as plasma bolts seared through the air where they'd been standing. They dove for cover behind a stack of cargo containers, the acrid smell of ionized air filling their lungs. Second wave? Jared asked, checking his weapon. Worse. Tyler's eyes narrowed as she peered through the darkness. Elite hunters. Their used stealth fields a shimmer in the air was their only warning before a massive figure materialized beside their position. Jared rolled left, while Tyler went right. Their perfect synchronization once again proving deadly as they caught the hunter in crossfire. But these weren't ordinary assassins. The hunter's armor absorbed their shots, and its counterattack drove them further apart. The ship, Jared shouted, providing covering fire as Tyler sprinted toward the vessel's access panel. See if you can get her started, Jared. Her voice carried a note of dread. The main power core. It's been sabotaged. They knew we'd come here. More hunters cloaked around them, their armor gleaming dully in the emergency lighting. Jared counted at least 8, all armed with weapons that could turn him and Tyler into vapor with a single shot. Surrender, one of them commanded, his voice distorted by his helmet speakers. The Empire wants you both alive. Really? Jared's mind raced, analyzing angles, distances, possibilities. That's new. Usually they just want me dead. Your genetic adaptations are too valuable to waste, another hunter explained, and the traitor must face imperial justice. Tyler's laugh was cold. Justice? Is that what you call experimenting on innocent humans, turning them into weapons while she kept them talking? Jared's fingers found a small device in his vest pocket, one of his toxic gas grenades. But this close to the ship, using it could damage vital components they'd need to repair. Unless Tyler, he called out, letting her see the grenade. Remember how we met her? Eyes widened slightly, understanding flowing between them. When you shared your medicine? Yeah, about that. He activated the grenade. I think it's time to share something else. The hunters realized his intent too late. The grenade detonated, releasing a cloud of concentrated toxins that began eating through their armor's filtration systems. But Jared and Tyler were already moving, diving into the ship and sealing the airlock behind them. The ship's environmental systems are separate from the main power core, Tyler explained as they made their way to the engine room. We can repair it, but it'll take time. How much time? 2 hours, maybe 3. She began accessing damaged systems, and that's assuming they don't break in before. Jared silenced her with a kiss, fierce and urgent. When they parted, his ace blue eyes blazed with determination. Then we better work fast. They fell into a rhythm, repairing systems and watching each other's backs as the hunters tried to breach the ship's defenses. Every few minutes new explosions would rock the vessel, but the Empyrean-grade hull held firm. As they worked, their hands would brush, gazes would lock, and the tension between them built like a gathering storm. Even in the midst of danger, or perhaps because of it, their attraction crackled with electric intensity. You were staring, Tyler observed as she reconnected power couplings. Can't help it, Jared grinned, passing her tools as needed. You're sexy when you're saving our lives, only then, especially then. Another explosion rocked the ship, throwing them together. Neither moved to separate their bodies, fitting together perfectly in the cramped engine room. We shouldn't, Tyler whispered, even as her hands tracked the muscles of his arms. Probably not, Jared agreed, his fingers tangling in her silver hair. But when have we done anything? We should. Their lips met in a passionate clash, hands exploring, bodies pressing closer. The danger outside only heightened their need for connection, for the affirmation of life in the face of death. Later, as they lay tangled together on the engine room floor, Tyler traced the new cuts and bruises on Jared's skin. The power core is almost repaired. Another hour at most. Good. He kissed her shoulder. Because I have a plan. Does it involve more explosions? Naturally. He sat up, pulling her with him. Those hunters are using standard Imperial tech designed to filter out this planet's natural toxins. Understanding dawned in her golden eyes. but not the concentrated version you've weaponized exactly. We can use the ship's atmospheric processors to spread it through the hangar. Their suits won't be able to handle it." "That's brilliant." She kissed him quickly before returning to work. "And slightly terrifying story of my life. Since meeting you, he began calibrating the atmospheric systems. Speaking of which, we're almost out of Nexilin. We'll find more." She paused in her work, looking at him seriously. "You know, when you first his eyes, you want to release poison gas on an Imperial flagship." "Not poison gas." She pulled out a small vial, their last dose of Nexilin. "But we can use the environmental systems to spread it through the ship. The diluted medicine will be harmless to most species, but it will trigger their toxin sensors," Jared finished, grinning. "Force and evacuation protocol." "Exactly." And in the confusion, they worked quickly, Jared using his experience with environmental systems to modify the ventilation, while Tyler calculated the dispersal pattern as they worked in the cramped space. Their bodies pressed together, the familiar tension building between them. "You know," Jared murmured, his breath hot against her neck, "for someone who started out needing my medicine, you've gotten pretty creative with it. I had a good teacher." She turned in his arms, her lips finding his. "You humans, you never stop surprising me." Their passion ignited once again, fierce and urgent, in that maintenance alcove surrounded by danger. They came together in a celebration of life and defiance. Their coupling was quick but intense, leaving them breathless and more determined than ever as they lay tangled together, the ship's alarm still blaring. Tyler traced the Imperial insignia on Jared's borrowed armor. "We have about 10 minutes before they realize the evacuation alert is false. Then we better make them count." He stood, pulling her up with him, "ready to save humanity with you." She smiled, checking her weapons. "Always, you know." They triggered the modified ventil, a system, and waited. Within minutes, chaos erupted as emergency protocols activated. Crew members rushed toward escape pods, leaving their posts unmanned. In the confusion, Jared and Tyler slipped through the now abandoned security checkpoints. The weapon development lab was massive, filled with complex machinery and testing chambers. At its center stood a device that made Jared's blood run cold, a delivery system for the genetic modifier ready to launch. "Can you disable it?" he asked, watching as Tyler accessed the main console. Better. Her fingers flew across the controls. "I can reprogram it. Instead of altering human DNA, it will destroy itself and any research data in the Empire's network." "How long?" "5 minutes, maybe less." If the lab doors exploded inward and Imperial troops poured through, at their heads stood a tall figure in ornate armor, the ship's commander. "Impressive," he said, his voice carrying artificial resonance. "But futile. Did you really think we wouldn't recognize the Empire's most wanted fugitives?" Jared and Tyler stood back to back, weapons raised, surrounded by dozens of troops. The commander next words, however, froze them in place, especially when one of them carries such unique genetic markers we gave him 3 years ago on a toxic planet. The commander's words hung in the air like toxic mist as Jared and Tyler stood surrounded by Imperial troops. Warning lights flashed across the weapon development lab's displays, indicating an imminent test sequence. "You see," the commander continued, his artificial voice carrying a note of pride, "we didn't just study your adaptation to the toxic environment. We engineered it, every survival instinct, every genetic enhancement, all carefully designed." Jared's grip tightened on his weapon. "If that's true, you did a pretty poor job. I still chose to disobey orders." "But that's where you're wrong." The commander's helmet retracted, revealing features that seemed human yet not quite. "Your moral compass, your stubborn principles, they were exactly what we wanted, the perfect blend of human unpredictability and engineered resilience." "Why?" Tyler demanded, her golden eyes blazing. "Why go to such lengths?" "Because humanity terrifies us." The commander spread his arms. "Your species shouldn't exist. You're too adaptable, too resilient, too free. We needed to understand how to control that power." A sudden surge of energy pulsed through the weapon system. Alarms blared as automated voices announced the start of the deployment sequence. And now, the commander smiled, "we'll see the culmination of our work. Your enhanced genetics make you the perfect catalyst for our weapon. Your DNA will help us reshape humanity into something Manageable. Jared felt Tyler tense beside him. Without looking, he knew she was calculating angles, possibilities. Just as he was, their minds worked in perfect sync. Now a dance of survival and strategy. There's just one problem with your perfect plan, Jared said, slowly lowering his weapon. You forgot one critical variable. Oh, the commander raised an eyebrow. And what's that? You gave me the ability to survive in toxic environments. Jared's ice blue eyes met Tyler's golden ones. But you never specified which toxins in one fluid motion. Jared threw down the modified Nexalin capsules. They prepared earlier. The vials shattered, releasing a cloud of concentrated poison from his toxic planet, the same poison he'd spent 3 years weaponizing the Imperial troops. Armor began to corrode instantly. The commander's eyes widened in shock as his own protective systems failed. Impossible. He gasped. The concentration levels are exactly what I've been breathing for 3 years. Jared grabbed Tyler's hand. Run. They sprinted toward the weapon control console. As chaos erupted around them, the commander's troops fell back, their armor systems compromised, but the weapon was still powering up, its core pulsing with ominous energy. The deployment can't be stopped, Tyler called out, her fingers flying over the controls. But I can redirect it. Jared, your blood, your enhanced genetics could neutralize the effect. Do it. He was already rolling up his sleeve. How much do you need? All of it. Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. That's suicide, he said softly. Not necessarily. She pulled out a vial of Nexalin, one she'd hidden away. Your body adapted to the toxic planet. Because of the Empire's engineering with this, you might survive long enough for me to synthesize more. Another explosion rocked the lab as the Imperial troops regrouped, now wearing sealed emergency gear. The commander's voice rang out, ordering them to secure the weapon. No time to debate, Jared said, extending his arm. Do it. Tyler worked with incredible speed, drawing his blood and interfacing it with the weapon delivery system. As she did, Jared covered their position, his shots keeping the advancing troops at bay. Ready, she announced. But Jared, this will hurt. He pulled her close, kissing her fiercely. Worth it. She initiated the sequence, and Jared felt liquid fire pour through his veins. The weapon's energy field enveloped him, using his enhanced genetics to create a countermeasure. The pain was excruciating, but he remained standing, held up by sheer willpower and T's support. The commander watched in horror as his weapon's energy signature changed the genetic modifier, transforming into something new. What have you done? Exactly what you designed me to do, Jared managed through gritted teeth. Adapt. The weapon fired, but instead of targeting human DNA for control, it released a wave of Jared's enhanced genetics that carry not just survival traits, but the very unpredictability and moral strength the Empire had feared. No, the commander lunged for the controls, but Tyler was faster. She injected Jared with the Nix-Allen, supporting him as the wave of energy washed over the ship. You know what your real mistake was? Jared asked the commander as the man stared at his own trembling hands. You thought you could control human nature, but what makes us human isn't our DNA, it's our choices. The energy waves spread throughout the ship, then began broadcasting to the Imperial fleet everywhere it touched. It carried the same message encoded in Jared's enhanced genetics: the strength to survive, the will to resist control, and most importantly, the capacity for choice. It's done, Tyler whispered, holding Jared as his strength returned the weapon. It's changing them, not controlling them, but giving them the freedom to choose. Like you chose to help me when I shared my medicine. He smiled weakly. Exactly like that. She kissed him softly. Now let's get out of here before they remember how to choose to shoot us. They made their way back to their ship, supporting each other through corridors filled with confused Imperial troops. The commander's voice echoed behind them, but it was no longer threatening. It was wondering, questioning, free in the safety of their stolen vessel. As they plotted a course away from the Imperial fleet, Tile straddled Jared's lap in the pilot's chair. You know, for someone engineered by the Empire, you turned out surprisingly human. And maybe that's what they never understood. He pulled her closer, his hands tracing familiar patterns on her skin. Being human isn't about genetics, it's about connection, choice, the sharing what you have with someone who needs it more. Their lips met in a passionate kiss as their ship carried them toward freedom. Behind them, the Imperial fleet hung motionless in space, its crews experiencing true choice for the first time. Where to now? Tyler asked, her golden eyes glowing with possibility. Anywhere. We want. Jared smiled. After all, we've got plenty of medicine, a fast ship, and each